Morning, everybody. This is Kelsey with Central Region Rock, and welcome to today's webinar on satellite support. Just a quick overview of some of the things that we're going to cover this morning. We'll talk about the collaborative partnership in regards to the satellite support. Today's presentation will be loaded later this week on the website that you see, as well as all the training materials, as well as additional web addresses that you see throughout this presentation. All that information will be available at the web address there at the Google site for the Central Region Rock. We'll talk about how to request satellite imagery, how to view that imagery, as well as the different types of satellite imagery, and how to seek and receive additional support with satellite imagery that you've requested, as well as viewing it, and then we'll take questions at the end of the presentation. So real quickly, I just want to thank partners who have been involved in this project. It does include USGS, as well as the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, who have given us access to some of the higher res satellite imagery, as well as NASA Sport, who has been very instrumental in regards to transitioning access to the satellite information into the Damage Assessment Toolkit, as well as with the training. So this has been a joint effort with these partners. Just a reminder, the Rock Google site, this is just a quick look of what it looks like. The web address there at the top, and if you'll click on the hyperlink there, the emergency satellite support, that red box, all the information that you see this morning will be updated on this Google site later this week, as well as the recording to this presentation. So what are we talking about when we're talking about satellite imagery and support? Well, here's just an example from the Washington, Illinois tornado from November 17th of 2013, imagery that was collected after the event. And with that imagery, you can clearly see the damage associated with this tornado as it moved through Washington, Illinois. This would be useful information to further refine and enhance when you're out doing a damage survey. So some new additions have occurred just recently, which should make the request process easier. And this is a request process that goes through USGS. Here's just a snapshot of the actual interface through USGS. And real quickly, just want to go over some best practices associated with this, and then we'll take a closer look at the graphical user interface itself. So of most important is that you're going to have to request individual accounts. USGS is not going to allow just one single office account. So any staff member that wants access or will be requesting data or wants to view eventually the data will need to set up an account, and would strongly encourage that those accounts be set up prior to the event instead of during or immediately after the event. And with that, would also encourage that collection areas make them as small and refined as possible, especially with a higher resolution data. A larger file size and covering a larger area means you have to look at more data, and it's often harder to process after the event. Also recommend the use when we're talking about looking at damage paths from tornadoes, the use of National Severe Storms Laboratory rotational tracks to further refine that collection area. That's usually a pretty good starting point, which is even typically smaller than what a warning polygon is. You can identify that once you've used that rotational track, either in Google Earth, highlight that area with a KML or and download a KML or KMZ file, and upload that essentially to this request site, or you can actually use the interface to draw your own polygon directly into the interface, and we'll go into that in a little bit as well. Additional best practice would be under the additional information section to include your WFO name, as well as the requester's name and contact information, including email and phone number. That will help everybody all along the lines. And then also we'll talk about the help function coming up. So once a collection is made, this is going to notify USGS to schedule the collection. An email will be sent to you, the requester. Again, this will be individual accounts, and also that email will be sent to the Central Region Rock, as well as NASA Sport. Real quickly, I just want to go through the browser of what this page actually looks like. So once you have an account set up and you've been granted access to this page, if you'll click on New Data Request, and there are several drop-down menus here, you'll look through the event list. If an event collection has already been set up, you'll notice that it's here. Will be named. Typically, USGS will name these by year, month, and then just kind of a generic name to cover a pretty large event. So first, I would look to see if the event that's happened essentially within your area has already been titled. If not, most of the time you're probably going to be doing an unsupported and then whatever you're collecting it for. Keep in mind, you can do collections not just for tornadoes. You could be looking for, you could collect for fires and floods. It's really endless on what you could, what information from a satellite, high-resolution satellite that you might be interested in. So collect, if we have a tornado event, would select a tornado. The acquisition start date, essentially, so that would be today. The type of imagery, and NASA Sport will be talking more about the different types of imagery to help you with your selections and in regards to that. Then also the image resolution associated with that, and then also, well, let me pick an image and a resolution associated with that. All right, whether you want it to be publicly viewable or not, going to recommend that you select yes on this. Whether you want archived pre-event imagery needed, so after a tornado event, it could be useful to select this as yes. So what USGS would do would look through their archives of imagery that they've already collected in previous weeks, months, and years to see if they have any imagery over that area, and then they would also download that imagery from their archives and make it available. So we could look at imagery before an event and after the event. Repetitive imaging required. Okay, so this is if the satellite passes over and they try to do just one collection, or they may try to, or if it's a high-impact event where the response and recovery is going to be pretty extensive, then they would be trying to do collections throughout either a week, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and that's something you may want to consider. But typically, for our purposes, probably that single collection is going to be the way to go. Duration, and then just that gets back into the period of time, whether you're going to do single, daily, monthly, bi-weekly, those types of things, essentially the end date of your collection when that's occurred. So down below is the graphical user interface with Google Earth. There's a variety of different options here in regards to a point, to a bounding box, or to a multi-point polygon. I would probably imagine that most collections were going to be probably in the multi-point polygon or uploading a KML file. So let's just quickly do the multi-point polygon, just moving a cursor around, zooming in here, and left click just brings a point, and you can see how the polygon is drawn. Once that polygon's drawn, I've got all my information set up here. Then I'm just going to click here, submit my request, and then that's going to start the collection process, triggering at least that to USGS so that can be scheduled for collection. Additional emails would be followed up as data is collected and notifying you of those types of things. If we were going to load a KML file, we'd already have that available. Just click on Choose File, upload that, and then that area that you are interested in, or at least what's in your KML file, would highlight there on the map. All right, so that's that portion of at least requesting access for the collection of data itself. Here's an example of what the National Severe Storms Laboratory rotational tracks actually look like from the Washington, Illinois tornado back in 2013. So you can see it's still a fairly broad area, even though in regards to the actual damage path from the actual on-site survey associated with that. What's overlaid here now, the red, is the actual damage path associated with that. So you can see even the rotational tracks do provide a pretty large area for collection itself, and you can see the different EF scales that were assigned with that damage path. And here's just another wider view of the actual damage path itself, some of the higher res imagery on a broader scale, and you can see just how the damage associated with that tornado and what it might look like, or what it did look like on satellite, and a closer view of that. All right, so once we've requested to collect satellite imagery through the website that we walked through, there's a couple different ways to view that imagery once it has been collected. This is the Hazards Data Distribution System, or HDDS. Once again, individual accounts must register for an account, must be approved by USGS, and after you receive an account, you've logged in, there are additional steps to access the data. And those additional steps are, you want to choose your event in the drop-down menu in the top left-hand arrow, and then you have to request access to that data. Some of the data is just restricted to essentially government agencies that are involved in working the event, and not for public access. So that's the reason why we have to request access for all of the data that's collected for a particular event. Now, once you have access, that access will continue for forever, essentially, once you've been granted access. And within these collections, you also find additional imagery that is collected and requests from other agencies such as FEMA, state emergency management agencies. The list goes on and on. You'll also find oftentimes aerial photos that have been taken and have been geocoded, and those can come from a variety of sources, from cap flights. USGS really tries to be a portal and a collector of data during high-impact events, or just any event that we request them to collect imagery on. Okay, so once you've got access to that collection, you're going to want to click on Search to see available data that is available in the portal and within your certain area, and then that will provide a list of, and here's just an example of some of that data. Just a couple of things here. The footprint, which is this area right here, will display the general area that the imagery was located. So that's useful information before you download it, or whether you have an interest in that information. The browse function within this will overlay the lower resolution image associated with that. If you want to download the component of the data, then you want to click on the green arrow to download the imagery. And just a couple recommendations. Once you've downloaded the imagery, use QGIS or IR Fan View, which is public software that's available to download and to use some of this high resolution imagery. So there's a lot of functionality in both this USGS site, the hazard data distribution system that I just have demoed, as well as the other that the collection portal that I just demoed. On the top right hand of both of these sites is a help function, and within that there's pretty extensive documentation of things that we've just covered if you have any questions, or you get into these sites and need additional information. So there's good resources there provided by USGS on the functionality of both of those sites. All right. Another way to view the data, and essentially what the rest of this webinar will cover, will be the Damage Assessment Toolkit, as well as the different types of imagery and what types of imagery, the benefits of that imagery. So with the Damage Assessment Toolkit, we're excited to announce that there is a beta version with the Damage Assessment Toolkit now available for download both on Apple devices as well as Android devices. For government-owned devices, you can download that through the NOAA app catalog. For personal devices, this link here should be used, and you can download that to personal devices. Another best practice would recommend that you maintain 2 DAT apps on your devices, both the operational DAT app, which is out there right now, as well as the beta DAT app. So if you're using the beta DAT app and for whatever reason it doesn't work or we run into bugs, then just fall back to the operational DAT app and all should be well. They both will work together. So no worries about conflict with those 2 different apps on your device. So the advantages of the DAT beta app is that if high-res satellite imagery is available, a request have been made and it is available, then you'll be able to view that imagery as well as quick guides that will be available in the Damage Assessment Toolkit when you're out in the field. So that is the advantage of the beta DAT app. And just a reminder, more information on the Damage Assessment Toolkit. There's a Google site that has been developed, and that's the link to that site. So with that, I want to turn it over now to NASA Sport and Lori Schultz. The NASA Sport group has been instrumental in providing training and developing training associated with this imagery, as well as assisting us in getting this imagery into the beta version of the Damage Assessment Toolkit, and can't thank them enough for their assistance with that. Lori Schultz is on the phone, and she's going to be providing additional information on the work that we've done there. Lori?
Good morning, all. What you have in front of you is a list of the full suite of imagery that we're currently supporting within the DAT as it becomes available. In green, you'll see the MODIS, the VIIRS, and the Landsat that we produce automatically, that if you opened up your beta DAT today, it would be there for any region of the CONUS area as it's produced. Anything in the yellow and the red, as you can see, the limited availability stuff, will be the stuff that you access through USGS and request. As those requests go in, hopefully we'll be in the loop of that email chain, and we'll download it, we'll process it, and we'll get it out into the DAT as quick as we can. The goal being that we get these out as near real time, minimizing latency and as the best we can and making them available. In the upcoming slides, I'll go over some of the quick guides we developed and some of the practices that we've determined as we've played with the DAT during the processing of the building of the beta version of the stat form. Next slide. So when you're accessing your data within the beta version of your DAT, when you open up your screen, hopefully in the landscape, you're going to see this view of the map. Yes, I clipped off all of the stuff for the damage indicators, but one of the things that you'll have to keep in mind as you go through this process is that the way that the DAT searches the WMS for data is based on the location that you have viewable in the map and the date that I'll show here shortly. So next slide. You're going to click on the high-res imagery button on the right-hand side, and you're going to see this screen. And you'll see the target date up there in the top, the buffer is the next line, opacity, and then we'll talk about cache imagery here shortly. To access the data and pick a date, there is data available for that date, but that might not be where we want to go. So click on the date, next slide, and you're going to get this roller wheel. Adjust the roller wheel to the date that you desire, and adjust the buffer to how many days before and after that date you'd be interested in looking at. You can also change the opacity at this point, but you can always change it later too based on the data set. To return to your previous menus, you need to tap the buffer, and then you need to tap the target date. If you don't change the buffer, then you can ignore it. But we'll talk about some best practices with the buffer a little bit later on. When you tap the target date, that sets the WMS to search for that area and that target date. Next slide. You'll return to this menu, and hopefully if there's data to be queried, you're going to see sports sitting in that online box there, or possibly offline if you've set stuff up to cache. tap on the sport, just tap right on the name of the sport, and next slide. You'll see a list of the available sensors that we are producing data for this day, for this buffer period, over this area. Tap any one of those sensor names, next slide, and you'll see what available products are associated with that sensor, in this case Landsat 8. If you tap either one of those products, next slide, you'll get a list of the available file times associated with that product, in this case the natural color, over this area. Tap any of the file names, next slide, and the menu will disappear and the data will appear. Now, in the PowerPoint presentation, that looked pretty quick. Some of these data sets are fairly large, and based on what your internet pull is going to be, there may be some delays in the data showing up. Be patient. It does come. The WMS has to tile it depending on your zoom level. So those are some things to keep in mind. But once it loads, you can zoom and pan as required. You can zoom in, zoom out. If you'd like to change any of your imagery, you would go through that process again, not necessarily changing the date, but just tapping the high-res imagery and picking a different file, or using the arrow on the left-hand side to go back out to pick a different sensor. As long as you don't tap the target date, the data available will continue to be available regardless of how you zoom and pan. If you want to change your area or if you want to change your date range, you'll have to go through the process again. These instructions we've created a quick guide for in more depth that you can query at your leisure as you play with the DAT moving forward. Next slide. If you see this type of screen come up and your files are in red, this indicates that you've got restricted data. That would be data that on USGS is typically related to commercial data that's been provided to support disasters. If you see this stuff in red, it means you can only use it for internal use. You cannot distribute it, and you cannot use it in any public briefings. The providers of this data gave it to us to use for the disaster, but we're not privy to their copyright, and they're not making money off of it. So please do not use it in public briefings. Next slide. So the quick guides. We've developed them for each one of the types of imagery that we've built. They all have a general similar setup in that there's images with examples of the different ways that you'd see damage tracks within the different data sets. Each of the images will be annotated, showing out features like clouds, showing where the tracks would be, showing some other features to keep in mind. Each quick guide will have a table with the specs of the different sensors and some things to keep in mind as far as how to use the data. And on the right-hand side, there'll be some points to ponder, some restrictions, some things to look for. Next slide. As we go through each of the quick guides, all of the images that we've used, we've created an archive for in the DAT that you can access today if you so desire. And this particular quick guide for the NDVI, in the top left-hand corner, you'll see the date of the event and how to navigate to where those archive data are. In this particular case, we're looking at NDVI, which is a normalized differential vegetation index, describes vegetation health. How you would use this within the DAT is anything that's not vegetation is going to come up as a white or a light green color. In the case of a damage track, you can foresee in time that the damage caused is going to cause your vegetation to die. So depending on how much vegetation is present and how fast it takes to die, your track will show up as a white linear feature. And you can see on the right-hand side some of those areas where I've got it annotated. If you pull up these cases in the DAT, you can zoom in and pan and see what those things will look like in any of the NDVI. It can be produced on most of the freely available sensors and some of the restricted sensors. And again, you'll see that when you pull it up in your DAT menu, whether or not that data is restricted, because it'll be in red. It's a good way to see what the terrain is, to see where your water sources are. Something to keep in mind is that NDVI is never computed around a water source. And so you'll see, like in the VIIRS and the MODIS imagery, some blue dots indicating where the water is, or you'll see some white areas indicating where clouds were. making the data in that general area not as usable as it could be, but hopefully you have enough data to look at. Next slide. False color imagery. It's produced by a couple of different sensors by combining your infrared, your red, and your green channels to produce an RGB composite image similar to what you see on the right. In most cases, your vegetation is going to be in some sort of pink or purple color scheme, and your urban, bare soil, and damage and clouds will be in the blue to gray color range, as shown here. On the left, you're looking at an imagery that was produced by After, and on the right, you're looking at an imagery that's produced by Spot. And so the colors are different slightly due to the resolution and specifications of the satellites themselves. So that's why you have slight differentiations in color. But predominantly, you see where the aqua and gray colors are related to city, and your purple colors right there around the Bankhead Forest area. You do see the damage track in the Astra imagery fairly well as it spreads across the entire swath. Unfortunately, the Spot swath was only in that small section there that I have highlighted in white. And so you can see that depending on where your swath is located during an event, during the capture, you may get more information in one than you do in the other. And typically I would recommend checking back as often as possible to see as things come in, to see where your damage and your assessment is. Next slide. True color imagery. This should be generally the easiest of the satellite data to use, as it should be fairly similar to looking at any, true color imagery, either produced by an aircraft or from any regular MODIS and VIIRS, that are produced daily. In this case, these are high resolution. This particular image came from a DoD satellite, and so would be restricted, and it will show up red, but gives you half-meter resolution over the tornado site. In this case, happens to be Moore, Oklahoma, in 2013. This type of imagery can be used for widespread assessment and identification of damage areas. It will likely be available and probably put into the DAT quicker when it's a larger event. Maybe it'll take some time. I have no control whatsoever on how USGS is able to get their data, so turnaround times for some of these data sets are going to depend on their availability and how fast the vendors are willing to let them go. And the cynic in me is going to say that larger events is going to cause that process to happen quicker. Be that as it may, as the data becomes available, Sport's goal is to get it out as quick as possible, even though we're not a 24/7 operation. So the next slide. The last type of imagery we'll talk about is panchromatic. It's also produced by a couple of different sensors, like Landsat, which would be freely available, but typically would come from commercial sources, thus being restricted. In this case, it's high resolution, it's black and white, and is particularly useful in this case for defining where you had damage in more rural areas, or at least that's what we're showing here. This is the Washington, Illinois tornado, and you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of the big image where the city damage, as was shown by Kelsey earlier in the presentation, is fairly apparent. And if you zoom in, as he did, the resolution is phenomenal. The interesting part about this tornado is that you can see the scarring in the fields as it goes through all of the different images. And when you are able to pull this up in your own DAT to look at the archive, there's 5 or 6 panchromatic images that you can go through and follow the path through. Again, this is used for widespread track path identification, scarring in rural areas, down trees, and other structural damage because of its high resolution. Next slide. This is just a quick overview of the archive cases that we have available within the DAT. The hope is that you're able to look at the cases not only to see the individual instruments and how the data is going to look, but how you can use the data together. April 27th does have the most available, near and dear to our hearts, since we were smack dab in the middle of it at the time. The domain in Nashville, Tennessee is included because it shows a case where there wasn't any commercial data available and just shows the VIIRS and the MODIS data in the vegetation, And because the tracks are created by tornadoes that were small, it was very difficult to make out any tracks, so we've included it as a null case because there will be times that the satellite data may not be as helpful as you'd want it to be. The May 20th case of Aurora, Oklahoma shows examples of the true color Pleiades imagery and the Aster false color. The domain over Washington, the panchromatic and the spot 5 panchromatic in false color, and your domain over Pilger, Nebraska for the commercial worldview and the Aster. Next slide. The help ticket and the post-event survey we'll highlight it here, but we're not going to go into gory detail. The help ticket's going to be the method that the individual offices can get a hold of sport when they need help interpreting the data or if they have a question about the satellite data within the DAT. This isn't meant to be a contact us to do the analysis for you. This is more, it's new data to you, and after you've exhausted all of your own internal resources, if there's something that we can do to help or there's a problem that you see, then this is an easy way to contact us. The link will be sent out, and it's basically will point towards a Google Doc where you'll fill out things like your WFO, your POC, email, and basically what product and sensor you're having problems with and what you're looking for. An email address will be available on the ticket itself where you can send any supporting documentation that you may have to help us solve the problem. That email will trigger to the 6 people here who work with the satellite data, as well as somebody at the regional operations command, so everybody's aware of what the problem is, and then somebody will get back to you as soon as possible. But to make sure that you have a way to deal with anything that's technical with the satellite data sets or any type of assessment and image interpretation that we can offer, as a last resort. Post-survey, this proposal team still has to turn in reports, and the way that this whole program works is based on the feedback we get from you, and that's the sport paradigm through and through for those of you who have worked with us before. That being said, we're not going to pester you during the event when you're busy, but the plan at this point is 10 to 30 days post-event. With help from the ROC, we're going to contact you, the proposal team, with a survey to fill out with all the members from your office who worked within the DAT and used the satellite data, and get some feedback on what your thoughts were, some lessons learned, some things you'd like to see moving forward. And those will be provided as needed as events occur, as opposed to just having it posted on a website for all to view at all times. There's also some talk about doing a monthly coordination call where any office would be invited to listen in on anything that's happened during the last month, any examples that maybe people have, any questions that have been put forth. And more details will be coming up on that as we move forward. And I believe that's the end of my slide deck. So we'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Lori. I appreciate all the information. Just one more quick reminder that within the Damage Assessment Toolkit, in the mobile versions, there is, and even on the desktop version, there are test mode capabilities for that. So with that, are there any questions for NASA Sport or on this end? Does anybody have any questions on the information that was presented today? Anybody else on the line?
On the line.
Aha, excellent. Okay, it's good to know that we had someone else there. So if there are no other questions, I guess I'll give one final call to questions. If we don't have any additional questions or any questions, then just a reminder that today's presentation has been recorded. It will be available, and I'll also send out a PDF of today's presentation to the previous used mailing list.
Hey, Kelsey.
Yes, sir.
This is Tony at Jackson, Kentucky. As far as the USGS request, how far back in time can you go to look at imagery there and request imagery?
Are you talking from an archive standpoint, or are you talking from...
Yeah. I mean, can you go back 2-3 years to request information, a window, 2 or 3 years ago, or is there a time limit on that?
From a pre-event imagery standpoint, they have a very extensive archive. In fact, it goes back years and years and years, if not decades.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right. We'll appreciate everybody's participation today. We would enjoy hearing any feedback in regards to the beta app itself and the imagery itself. And we will continue to move forward with development and further refinement with the beta version of this. Thank you again.